Is everything okay in Las Vegas? Feels like the Raiders are going through it a little bit. Plus, our Yike and Like of the week, it's Locked On NFL.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, football fans? Welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday. That means you get me, Luke Braun, at Luke Braun NFL, and I'm here with Lauren Cox at Cox Sports 1, bringing you we're recording this on Memorial Day, but you'll hear it on Tuesday. So bringing you this shortened week edition of the Locked On NFL podcast today. We got to just do a welfare check on the Raiders because it's getting worrisome. They have the Jimmy Garoppolo thing, talked about it a little bit yesterday with your boy Q, how he's got an injury waiver and all of that. Davante Adams is making his voice heard on some of his frustrations. Meanwhile, you've got like your exes hanging out together in New Orleans with John Gruden mentoring Derek Carr. And plus our Yike and Like of the week. But Lauren, let's start with maybe the most important player left on the Raiders, not counting Jimmy Garoppolo, if Jimmy Garoppolo is even going to be part of the Raiders, is Davante Adams. He has expressed quite a bit of frustration. He's been pretty vocal. And then when Josh McDaniels is asked about this, he had kind of not that much of an issue with it. Kind of felt like he's just letting the players go out and say whatever they want. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the energy, but it's like, what is Josh McDaniels supposed to do? Alienate the one really, really great player he's got left. And I don't know. Like, yes, you want him to sort of be, the leader of the team and be more forceful and saying like, okay, like we need to kind of keep this in house or whatever. But like once it's already out there, it's already out there. But I think it's more so disappointing, just like that it gets to this point, right, where Davante Adams says, I don't really see eye to eye with the direction of the franchise, and yet everyone's still rolling forward like everything is fine, and the Raiders are kind of in this middle ground area where trade away some veteran players like Darren Waller, and of course move on from Derek Carr and get younger in some spots, but still trying to compete. And I don't know if they're doing this like sort of rebuild on the fly or retool on the fly situation, and it's just it's a mess. It's a messy situation, and when that starts to spill over and get more publicly messy too, like this is the time of year when you really don't want your team in the headlines, and it's been a lot of Raiders lately.
It has been a lot of Raiders headlines. And the specific point that Davante Adams has is essentially like, I don't really see eye to eye with the way the front office is handling things. And in fairness, I think I'm with you, Davante. I think what the Raiders have been doing has been really weird to bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. And now he's got this foot thing, and they knew about the foot thing when they signed him. And pass on a quarterback in the top 10, the way that the Raiders have been approaching, it feels like really hard to discern what they're building to. So I get it with Davante Adams. He's not getting any younger. There's only so many years left. He had been so close for so many years on some of those Packers teams to, the promised land and the ring and all of that stuff. You got to wonder, am I in the right place? And while I understand that sentiment, it's another thing entirely to go out and say it publicly and essentially, air out that dirty laundry. That's a great conversation to have with your GM, your coach, and say, hey, I don't feel like, are we really supported here, or are we spinning our wheels? But to take it public is rough. Now, I'm always someone who says like, look, players should be allowed to say this kind of thing, and we probably shouldn't make as big of a deal out of it as we do every time. Like, it's an opinion, and it's a pretty good one, and he gets to have it. And the shut up and dribble kind of stuff drives me nuts. But it does reflect poorly on like the Raiders, because that's not the prevailing attitude around the league. That's something that is gonna upset people, and Davante Adams knows it's gonna upset people. And here we are, and it's just kind of like, well, I guess we just kind of have to put up with whatever because he's Davante Adams.
Well, the whole thing just feels like it was so easy to see coming, right? Like Davante Adams chose to be traded to the Raiders largely to play with Derek Carr again. And so then
Mm-hmm.
when I mean, it was his decision to leave Green Bay, and it was his decision to leave Green Bay largely to be with Derek Carr. So when the team then trades Derek Carr, that was the whole reason he wanted to be there, and he could also look around and see, DeAndre Hopkins gets released from his team. Of course, previous years like AJ Brown gets traded, DJ Moore gets traded, Tyreek Hill gets traded. Like, all these wide receivers have a lot of power and flexibility to be on the move and kind of go where they want to go. And he wanted to go to the Raiders for one specific reason, and that reason is no longer there. So I can imagine him kind of looking around saying, well, why am I still here then? Why do I want to be
Mm-hmm.
here? I told them why I wanted to be here in the first place. And they've since sort of changed and altered that reason for me. And now now I can kind of understand, like, yeah, not that it has to be specifically a shot against Jimmy Garoppolo by any means, but it's just like that Derek Carr was his guy. And then without his guy there, what is he there for?
Right. Like what do the Raiders want us to believe? Like what is their line, you know? Are they trying to sell us that, there's more long-term vision and that Jimmy Garoppolo is just kind of a bridge here? Are they trying to sell us that no, we think Jimmy Garoppolo plus Davante Adams plus the roster we have, that's a contender? I think in betting odds terms, that's an insane point. But for football teams, I mean, 32 out of 32 teams think that they can win the Super Bowl, right? That's always going to be the mentality, whether you're favored or not. So I guess the question becomes, like, I don't know if that's what the Raiders are telling us though, because they're saying like, yeah, Davante has a point. We're kind of aimless. It's like, what do you want your fans to think?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, you're saying, what are the Raiders trying to sell us on? What are they selling Davante Adams on? Like, what are they telling him?
Well, yeah,
To where he doesn't see eye to eye with the organization, because that would seem to be the even bigger disconnect here. It's like you wouldn't have to try and sell us or sell the fan base on things if everyone in the organization was sort of lockstep in where that was going. And clearly, your biggest name, most prominent player, at least on offense, is not seemingly on board, but I guess not off board enough to fully demand a trade either. Like, what does Davante Adams want then at this point? Like, he's saying he's upset, but what? Okay, he's upset, but he's just going to keep playing. So what's going to change?
right. You're just gonna have him play upset, I guess, and that I guess is fine. Like the sell is so weird. It is far from the only weird thing going on in Las Vegas, though, and we still have to talk about. I do want to mention Jimmy Garoppolo's thing. I'll do that later. I also want to uh just sympathize with Raiders fans a little bit as they watch all this dysfunction, and then they watch like John Gruden go work with Derek Carr, but in New Orleans. So let's get into that next.
First, we got to tell you about our friends at Built Bar, the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars. This past weekend I was out camping at the Indy 500 with some friends of mine. That's why my voice sounds the way it does. And when we're out and sitting around the fire, you need a little snack during the day. And I'll tell you what, I brought 4 or 5 Built Bars with me, the new very vanilla flavor, and boy, did those help carry me through a long weekend out in the sun. A lot of fun we were having there. But when I needed a source of protein or a go-to meal, a little snack there, something that tasted sweet and delicious, but was also good for me because nutrition was a little lacking this weekend as well. I had my Built Bars. They're soft, they're easy to chew, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and this new very vanilla flavor is sweet and delicious. It's a really nice balance to the chocolatey flavor. But just like every Built Bar, the very vanilla is high in protein, high in fiber, low in sugar, and low in calories. It's the perfect treat. Whether you're camping like I was or you're just at home looking for something delicious, Built Bars are there for you. You can find all of the great flavors at built.com, or you can get them even faster in person at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Walmart's got 4 bar boxes of some of their hit flavors, the chocolate, or the double chocolate bar, the coconut puffs, and the cookies and cream. And Sam's Club has 2 of my all-time favorite flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puffs, in a 13 bar box. Go try them out or check them out at built.com, and you'll thank us later.
Moving right along with this Tuesday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. So this isn't like super Raiders news; it's former Raiders news. But it still just kind of adds to this feeling that I'm sure Raiders fans. This episode is for you, because as we watch the Raiders crumble as an org, and all of this weird stuff going on, all of these headlines you don't want to see in May, you see John Gruden, whose gigantic contract buyout disaster is like still harming the organization. Working with Derek Carr, who you just moved on from sort of because of that. Not, I guess not directly because of that, but like that kind of had something to do with it. And that's kind of why Davante Adams is mad. And they're over in New Orleans just having a whale of a time.
It's just one big reunion party down south, and it's a good place to do it. But, but it's like even funnier, like with Dennis Allen being the head coach there and being involved with like that organization as
And
well.
Dennis
But
Allen too. Yeah.
yeah, like it's just a whole former Raiders party there running the show. But what I don't fully understand about this situation is like Gruden is coming down there to help the Saints install their offense, but it's They retained Pete Carmichael as the offensive coordinator, who had been there. He's the longest tenured offensive coordinator in the NFL. He was there for the vast majority of the Sean Payton regime. So it's like, what exactly is that offense looking like, and how exactly is John Gruden helping install someone else's offense, or is he just there to be like the thumbs up, hey guys, let's all have a good time. Like I love me some Derek Carr, I love me some Pete Carmichael. Here's a guy, like, is he just there for vibes and energy? Like how is he? Like what exactly is he able to do to help install an offense that it isn't his, or are they changing the Sean Payton offense a bit more to kind of fit Derek Carr a little bit more? Like that whole aspect of this seems. I mean, I know it's sort of under a similar sort of like West Coast style, but I'm curious, like with terminology and stuff, how well that translates.
I wonder. Yeah, it's a very similar offense for sure, and it kind of always has been. That sort of West Coast style. Sean Payton, Pete Carmichael, John Gruden, they all come from a similar place. I wonder if this is specifically a Derek Carr thing. If this is like look, Derek Carr is new to this organization. John Gruden is familiar with Derek Carr, coached with him for many years, knows well enough the playbook, or at least it's close enough to knowing the system and kind of what's important to it, and has that experience. And also, I mean, yeah, it's just like an experienced voice in the room. It's also John Gruden's return to the NFL after a sort of disgraceful exit, not disgraceful exit, with the scandal he was involved with in Las Vegas. So that feels like the most meaningful thing to me is, hey, John Gruden's coaching again. He's like back in this. I guess his timeout has been long enough.
Yeah, that was the other thing too. It's like, okay, so you can be racist, misogynistic, and homophobic in NFL emails, and I mean among many other things involved in his situation. And so the punishment on that is like sitting out 2 years, and now like I'm surprised the Saints. I mean, I'm sure they're getting some blowback from this, but it seems like a lot of it's just more like, oh, like that's interesting for Derek Carr, and like what does this mean on the field? But I'm surprised there's not more
Right.
blowback. Like, hey, wait a minute, like yeah, he's not like hired onto the coaching staff exactly, although I'm sure he's getting some sort of, compensation as a part of this, but just not in a permanent coaching role. But like, is this his sort of comeback tour, the beginning of it? Like, what does that look like for him? What does he want to do? I'm kind of surprised he even wants to even dabble around the coaching world a little bit anymore. Like, I don't know what kind of future he feels like he can still have, but it's only been what I think 2 years since he was let go from the Raiders. I think it was 2021 around there. So it has not been a long time for him to be already back working, at least in an offseason position on an NFL sideline.
It's like the classic radioactive coach arc where you sit your year, you got to take your time out, and then you come back on a team, but not in an official position. Like the first name that comes to mind, because I'm a Vikings fan, is Brad Childress. When Brad Childress got fired, it was very radioactive because it was a very bitter thing. He was like feuding with players. It was like really ugly. And he was super radioactive. And I'm pretty sure he took a year off and then he came back on Andy Reid's staff, because Andy Reid's his mentor, as like a spread game analyst was the title. And it was like a hilariously fake title. And it's like, that's the fake job that your like pal gives you. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on where that's just, you know what? He's super radioactive and the PR is terrible, but you can't deny that dude knows stuff and he's been around forever and he's probably a valuable addition from a purely objective standpoint if you just kind of hold your nose on the moral aspect of it. And I guess the way to hold your nose on the moral aspect of it is to give him like a fake job and just say, well, he's just kind of here to help us with Derek. It's not really a big, we don't really endorse that. It's kind of, we just got like one foot in the muck.
Yeah, but then it's like, okay, so slowly over time, his name is back in the public, and it's back in the public eye in an
And it
otherwise.
rehabilitates the image. And it's. Tale as old as time.
Yeah, it's one off-season meeting here with the Saints, and then it's maybe after the year we hear he consulted during the year for that organization, and then, okay, maybe it's, a little dabble here. Maybe he gets a little smaller, like, TV deal here or there to do some color commentary on a smaller build-up or something to just slowly rehabilitate his image. The one thing working against him then is just the ongoing lawsuit over this, that he does bring his own attention, but his own negative publicity back to himself, that, like, because he's suing the NFL over the leak of the emails that exposed all this. That lawsuit is currently on pause illegally while an appeal goes through by the NFL to move to closed door arbitration. So, like, it's still going, but it's not, like, actively going. But every time another update comes in, that it'll be a reminder to all of us of, like, why is he suing the NFL again? Oh yeah, because he got in trouble for being a gigantic I was going to use naughty words. He a very bad person. He did very bad things.
An allegedly very bad person. We should put a big old allegedly on this whole segment. Everything we said is alleged and under active arbitration.
Well, the emails, I had his name. According to the New York Times, he did these things, and his name was on those.
Per the New York Times. There it is.
Per the New York Times.
Yes. Let's jump off that train. And let's get a little bit of positivity going with or half positivity, and then we can make fun of something with our Yike and Like of the week. Have a little bit of fun. I'm not done with the Raiders just yet on that, so that will be up next. All right, everybody, let's move on. It is Tuesday here on the Locked On NFL podcast, and thank you so much to all of our everydayers who listen to this show every single day. Cannot appreciate you enough. So, Lauren, usually Ross Jackson is here on Tuesdays. He is currently inundated with the ultimate NBA mock draft. They're doing a similar thing to what we do during our draft season. And Ross is currently like super swamped with that. So go listen to that, by the way, if you're an NBA draft fan. Go listen to that when it comes out. But for us on Tuesdays, we always do our Yike and our Like of the week. So give me something that made you say one singular Yike.
For me, it was the comments from Lions wide receiver Jameson Williams about his suspension for gambling, when he said, like, didn't know it was coming and he wasn't aware.
We got to dunk on the Lions once. We got a Bears and a Vikings guy on here. I mean, come on.
Like, how can you not be aware of the NFL's gambling policy? Like, certainly I understand perhaps not knowing every little inch. Certainly none of us have read the full, like, appendix in the rule book, every word of every line. Sure, I wouldn't expect him that, but, like, to claim I didn't know that what I was doing was going to get me in trouble. I don't buy it. Like, either he is just very unaware, even though the NFL went to every team and laid out and said, hey, here are the rules, to the Players Association, here are the rules. Maybe he didn't see it. Maybe he was out that day. Maybe he ignored it, whatever. But Calvin Ridley already got suspended for this, right? Like, he could not have missed another one of the premier wide receivers in the NFL being suspended for gambling. And how you can't, maybe it was a different style of gambling. We don't know exactly, what he specifically gambled on and where, but, like, if you see one of your other wide receivers suspended for gambling, you might, just common sense would be like, hey, wait a minute. Maybe I should know the rules for gambling before I do gambling of my own, instead of saying, oh, I didn't realize I was breaking the rules. Like, come on. Like, that's a big yike for me.
Yeah, that whole situation. And it sounds, we were like hinted that we were going to get other names as well. If you're an NFL player and you happen to be listening to the Locked On NFL podcast, stop gambling. Just stop doing it. Just don't try to get away. I know that you like technically can if it's not an NFL game and you're not on the right campus or whatever the rule is, but just don't. It's fine. Don't do it. It seems easy. I will also give my yike, and then we'll wrap it out with a more positivity. But my yike goes to the reporting surrounding this Jimmy Garoppolo injury waiver situation. This has turned into, in particular, Mike Florio is going off on how he has like been talking about this, and he's feeling vindicated for some reason. People are saying that he's not even like, it's a little bit still misrepresented. So all I want to do is say, this is the situation with Jimmy Garoppolo. from a purely objective contract standpoint, because I feel like people actually are misunderstanding the dynamic here. The dynamic is, there was no revisiting of the contract. There was no added clause. I think Ian Rappaport said that, and I understand that is not the case, at least according to Over the Cap. It was always the way the contract was, and it's just now being reported that there is an injury waiver in it. An injury waiver is not that uncommon of a thing. It essentially allows the team to void out guarantees and signing bonus and stuff in the event that Jimmy Garoppolo can't play. And if there's a foot issue that they knew about, it's a kind of an insurance policy against that. It's, hey, we're pretty sure this foot is going to heal, but just in case it doesn't, we essentially want our out in the contract in case we signed you and you can't play. It is more common in the event that an injury is like really serious, and that like, hey, we actually kind of think you can't play. Once the player has failed the physical, which is what Jimmy Garoppolo did by kind of a default, he essentially said, yeah, I won't be able to pass a physical. My foot's not healthy. But once a player fails a physical, they just say, all right, well, then never mind on this contract. And the player remains a free agent until they're healthy enough to pass a physical. And then they can kind of re-engage in talks with whoever. But with Jimmy Garoppolo, the Raiders signed him anyways, but just with this little insurance policy, which is a way lower, it betrays a way lower level of concern about the injury. Like the Raiders could have said, yeah, we know about that foot injury. We know you failed the physical. We have all the information that now we all as fans have. But we're still going to do it anyways. We're still going to bring you on anyways. And if Jimmy Garoppolo like doesn't play it down for the Raiders, that is still catastrophic cap-wise, because that injury waiver does not get rid of like all of the guaranteed money and all the stuff that Jimmy Garoppolo got. So that is still like a really big disaster for the Raiders. All that is to say, the idea that is going around that the Raiders are like QB-less, I think is a little bunk. And this is not necessarily me making fun of the Raiders at all. If anything, it's the opposite. It's me making fun of people like us reacting to the Raiders. But I just want people to understand that like that injury waiver was not a later addition to the contract. That was always in it. And that the Raiders always knew this. And it's a matter of now we are, as lay people, finding out information in a different order than the Raiders had it. And that's a really important distinction when you want to evaluate the Raiders as decision makers.
Yeah, it does add some, I don't want to say add some context, but it's like, it's important to keep in mind, like when they decided in the NFL draft to not trade up for a quarterback from 7, they knew about this. Like this was already part of that process, right? It wasn't like, oh, if only they had known, maybe they would have to trade up for a QB. Like, no, they
just saw Jimmy Garoppolo in person for the first time yesterday. And oh my God, he's got a boot on his foot. How did nobody tell Mark Davis about this? Like, how stupid do you think these teams are? Come on.
And one other thing on the injury waiver, this happened last year with the Chicago Bears. I do Lockdown Bears with Larry Ogunjobi. They agreed to a deal. They had it in.
That was that.
And it was his foot. It was his foot injury, and so they bailed. And they said, "Sorry, we're not. We wanted you for a pretty significant contract, but we're not going to take the risk here on this foot injury. You're not a quarterback, unfortunately. You're not that valuable to our organization."
And did he end up playing anywhere?
He signed a 1-year deal with Pittsburgh and played pretty well, but he didn't sign until long after the draft. He was like a May or June signing last year for them. And there was thought that maybe the Bears might still have brought him back after the draft once his foot was healed, but alas.
Yeah, it's something that happens. There's a great Over the Cap article that goes over a whole bunch of examples of this. Go back to Colin Kaepernick, Michael Brockers in 2020 had one like this. Ryan Grant, with the Ravens. There have been a lot of examples of this, but you know what? It's enough griping, enough whining out of us. Give me something that you liked this week, something that made you feel good.
Yeah, this one's not as much like an on the field thing, but one that I think I wasn't worried about it because I didn't know to be worried about it until something finally happened on it. But so with NFL Sunday Ticket moving to YouTube TV, a lot of bars and restaurants don't have great capabilities to just like, get like a business YouTube TV plan on top of their, subscription package. So there's like a behind the scenes distribution process that DirecTV does. It's DirecTV Business, and they reached an agreement with Google through YouTube to allow NFL Sunday Ticket to go over DirecTV just to bars and restaurants, and not for commercial, not for like personal residential use, but just so that existing bars that have had Sunday Ticket can continue to do so. So you can go to your local bar and restaurant and still watch your out of market games through the same process. You wouldn't try, because I'm friends with bar owners. I know I've been to a lot of establishments. A lot of those guys are not good at figuring out how streaming services work and trying to get YouTube
Yeah.
TV on their TVs. Regular Sunday Ticket was enough of a learning curve for a lot of those guys. So to be able to just say, you know what, same package, same thing for bars and restaurants, like you can find your games, especially if you live out of your city's market. It's a lot easier to go to the bar and get that wherever you are in the country. That's a like for me.
That has been huge for me as somebody who does not live in my favorite team's market. I am going to give my like to my favorite team, be a big ol' homer about it. And I would like to shout out Harrison's Playmakers, which is Harrison Phillips, defensive tackle for the Minnesota Vikings. His charity, he started it back in his days in Buffalo. It has kind of migrated over to Minnesota now. And he started on Sunday his Harrison's Playmakers camp that is actually at the Vikings facility on the Vikings field. Harrison's Playmakers is a support and education nonprofit that is focused on mentoring kids with social, physical, and economic challenges, is the way that they put it. It's kids with special needs or other disabilities. And they were able to go out and hang out at the Vikings facility, hang out with Vikings, do all kinds of activities, a little bit of punt, pass, and kick, play around, have fun, and be social, which is really dope. And this is something that Harrison Phillips has been doing for a long time. And this is just kind of the latest installment of it. And I think it deserves a shout out. So that gets my like.
Can't get much better than that. NFL players do so much good charity, and even though I do the Lockdown Bears podcast, kudos to Harrison Phillips. We're all on the same team when it comes to working with kids, especially those with special needs. That's fun.
Yeah, and I think a lot of players, and I don't really have a problem if it is that way with players, that they kind of will do it because it's good PR, and that's kind of that, and they'll do a donation or a toy drive or something like that. And it's like kind of just a thing they do for PR, and I personally have no issue with that. I think that's great. But I think it's even cooler when, and it really, for Harrison Phillips, he's been doing this for so long, participating in this for so long. It's really a cause that is very near and dear to his heart. And there's something that just feels great about that. Something to send you off in this late May episode of the Locked On NFL podcast. Thank you so much. Tomorrow you get Tony and James. They'll talk about whatever is going on in the NFL. Who knows what kind of wacky news will come out of Las Vegas next. For Lauren Cox, I am Luke Braun. We'll see you next time on the Locked On NFL podcast.